Welcome to the end of Series 2 Thoughts video. If you, for some reason, didn't watch this in Series 1, or you didn't watch the mid-series Thoughts video for either series, this is where I kind of recap my thoughts that came up mostly while I was editing or after I had time to process some episodes, and I break it up basically in half of the season. So the mid-series Thoughts video covered episodes 2-1 through 2-6. Actually, I think even the Christmas Invasion might have been on there as well. And then this one's going to cover 2-7 through 2-13 because I decided at the end of Series 1 that I'm going to treat the Christmas episodes as like an episode 0 for the next series. So the Christmas Bride will happen in Series 3. So let's just get into this because I always want these to be short and then they end up being like an hour and a half. So first up is The Idiot's Lantern. This episode was definitely filler, which I don't always mind. I made it less than 2 minutes into this, and I'm going to mention Supernatural for the first time. Not great. But some of my favorite Supernatural episodes are filler episodes. So even on my favorite show of all time, the filler stuff is sometimes fine. So I don't really have a problem with that. The filming style, which Stephen Cooper on Patreon called it like Dutch angles. I don't know anything about filming, but whatever that is, it was really interesting at first, and I thought it was kind of cool and kind of different, and it kept me engaged, but it completely lost its impact by the end because like it was just so overused. It was way, way, way too much. It should have been used like only 25% of the time that it was used. At first, it added to the tension and the unease and the suspicion, but by the end, it just kind of seemed like they were using it as a distraction to hide like the lack of like depth or substance to the episode. So that's one thought. The thing that saved this episode for me, though, was the Doctor's reaction to Rose losing her face. I thought that I didn't like seeing the 9th Doctor mad, but the 10th Doctor and David take it to a whole other level, and it's amazing to watch. It really is. And you can really feel his fury and his love, whatever type of love it is in that moment, for Rose when he thought he lost her. So always love those moments in this show. I only have one more note for this one, honestly, because with it being filler, there just wasn't too much to talk about. But I do feel like the dynamic of the family in this wasn't really necessary. And it did kind of also seem to be like a way to add more substance to an episode that just didn't have much to it. The problem was that I like almost didn't really care about what was happening with The Wire and just cared about what was happening with the family. So when I say it wasn't necessary, it wasn't that it was bad. It didn't need to be in that story. And it actually ended up becoming the thing that I cared about more than what was actually really happening in the episode. Whereas if they hadn't had that storyline in it and had made it more focused on what was actually happening with like The Wire and all of that stuff, I would have been more interested in what the episode was actually about. Definitely not one of my favorites, and definitely not one I will watch on a rewatch. So that's it for that one. Okay, so on to episode 2-8. I think this is called Impossible Planet. I, for some reason, forgot to write it in my notes. So obviously this one is paired up with 2-9 Satan Pit, and so I'm going to kind of like lump these together as I talk about him here. The sweet, like young blonde mechanic, Scooty, I don't know what her name was. I couldn't tell what they were saying. But just before I watched this episode, I watched the pilot episode of Firefly. And she actually really reminded me of Kaylee in Firefly. And Kaylee was my favorite character in that episode of Firefly anyways. And so it was kind of nice to get a similar character right here. And obviously I liked her right off the bat. So yay, super fun that she died so quickly. But it was the same character, same job, first to be injured. And so it was just, it was a cool little like parallel there. I still have only seen the pilot episode of Firefly. I will continue giving it a shot at some point since it's such a short series. But as of right now, don't really talk anymore about the pilot if you want to talk about Firefly. My next note is that like the Doctor still feels so responsible for Rose. After losing the TARDIS, he says, "I've trapped you here. Not we're trapped here. I've trapped you here." Like he did this to her. He still is accepting full responsibility for her actions, which isn't kind of great. But I want to learn more about that. Like, why does he take all that on? He's had so many companions, but he still doesn't seem to accept that like they make their own decisions and they're responsible for themselves. Like he still feels so responsible for them after all of this time. And I kind of want to know why. And maybe Classic Who will show that. Because as of the time I'm recording this, I've only seen the first episode of the second, or up to the first episode of the second season of Classic Who. So still lots more to go. That might give me some answers there. But I also think it speaks to how lonely he is without a companion if he's still willing to, one, risk their lives, and two, take on the weight of that responsibility, like to have a companion around. And so that was it's just really interesting to see all these things play out in very subtle ways like that, like just with those little subtle word choices. And I would say, okay, and so my last note actually for episode 2-8, because then more stuff really kind of happens when you find out everything in the second part. But the most unrealistic thing for me in this episode was the captain just letting some random guy who just showed up on their ship go down into the pit with one of his crew members. I thought that was a little bit much. Yeah, I would have liked a little bit more of a pushback on that maybe, or just a little bit more convincing from the Doctor's part to like actually get to go. It was just a little bit too easy and unbelievable. So Satan Pit, and just kind of talking about the story overall now. This story was really, really good at building and then releasing tension. It was like a roller coaster of emotions that kept me highly invested throughout both parts. I mentioned it in the original reaction. That's not really a story I would probably normally like because we are in space and we're on like a space station or whatever. And there are alien creatures and none of those things are what I like. I like the stories rooted on Earth. And so this is not one that I would typically like, but I really genuinely did. And this was one of the reasons because of how they built and released this tension. It was like, it was just a constant up and down and up and down. It wasn't too much of one or the other at any one time. And so it was really nice at keeping me engaged. The other main reason of why I liked this episode was because the side characters were just awesome. They did such a good job with the side characters in this episode. I still want to know all the backstories on them from like what the Beast said to them, like what the things that he was doing to obviously like trigger them and get under their skin. It felt authentic. Like a lot of times when writers try to give like really quick backstories and they just throw in some line, it's not really believable. And you're like, that kind of feels like they just threw that in there. Like, I don't buy that that's part of that character's history. I don't buy that that character existed before this, this episode. But with this, they felt like a real team. They felt like they had a history and they all felt like they had secrets in their past. And now I want to know all of them and the stories behind them. Let's see. Okay, so the next episode is, I love seeing Rose take charge and act as the Doctor. Would when he was unable to because he was down in the pit, basically. And I love strong female characters, period. And at times, Rose is a little impulsive and flighty, which can get a little bit annoying. But in this one, she really stepped up and she took on that strong leader role. And it made me really proud of her. And then the last note that I have for this one of the other things that made me really enjoy these two episodes were David's monologues. He did such an amazing job with them. He was so captivating. I mean, at one point, I was so into his monologue that when the cable snapped, it scared the crap out of me because I was zoned in on what he was saying. And I mean, just the writing was brilliant. The performance was brilliant. How they did it, where a lot of the times when he was giving those monologues, it was kind of just a tight shot of his face with nothing really in the background, just blackness in the background and darkness. And so you had nothing else to focus on except for him and what he was saying. And I thought it was really nicely done. And I can only imagine what it was like for him to get the scripts for these episodes and realize how much dialogue there was for him. I would think as an actor, it would be both daunting and exciting. And he absolutely pulled off every single one of them. And yeah, these are two episodes that I would probably watch on a rewatch, which still feels really weird to say. Now they're not my favorites. They're not even my favorites of this series, but they were good. They impressed me. Enjoyed them more than I thought they would, and I would probably rewatch them. Okay, now episode 210, Love and Monsters, I think is what it's called. This might be Okay, maybe not. I was thinking this episode might have the most notes for me, but I don't think it does. And that's because, like, Impossible Planet and Satan Pit, I talked about those a lot during the actual reaction. But I wanted to sit with Love and Monsters. I wanted to see how I really felt about that. And I still feel the same way I did when I watched it. Again, apologies. I have to take it back to Supernatural because this episode reminded me a lot of an episode in that show called Bitten. It was very similar in the sense that Supernatural is about two brothers. They're the two main characters, and they're in every single episode. And then we got to Bitten, and they were barely in it, and it was filmed. It was like young college students who were filming themselves. And so it was, all of the footage from the episode until the very, very end was camera footage, like handheld camera footage. So very similar to this here, except the entire episode was that way. And it follows the journey of them basically like one of them gets bit by a werewolf and turning into it and all of this whole thing. And it's generally considered to be one of the most hated episodes in the show because it's so different. I actually really enjoyed it. And so when I saw this, like when I saw where we were heading, I was very confused at first, but I really liked Elton. He was interesting to watch. I liked the way that the story was being told. It was nice that we had, and I apologize, I don't know the actress's name. I should have looked it up, but the actress who played Moaning Myrtle in Harry Potter, like that was a nice surprise. It was fun. And so I was into this episode. It was a huge, huge letdown by the end. When the monster, the alien was revealed, the second I saw him, it just wiped away everything for me. I went from like really enjoying it and thinking this was so cool and so different to just like over it and done and like so disappointed. I get, yes, that this monster was part of like a competition, like it was like a kid's drawing, which I think is so, so cool. That's so neat. But great for children, not so much for me. It just was over the top. So I really liked how they tied in the major events, like from season 1 or from series 1 and series 2 up to this point, like into the story. It almost seemed like something that would be done in a finale, like where you have all these callbacks. But so like that just made it even more interesting because you're like, why are they bringing all this back up? Like this isn't even a finale. And so it just, made it a lot more interesting. I loved the storytelling in every sense, the writing, the delivery from Elton. He was entertaining enough for me to forget that we weren't getting Rose and the Doctor, which I feel like is hard to do. I mean, they're the entire show basically at this point of getting up to this episode. And so to not have either one of them really in this and for me to not really care all that much because I'm still just enjoying what I'm watching, like that's impressive. And I loved the flashbacks, like spliced in with him in his room. I really, really enjoyed it. And it's exactly the type of confused that I like to be watching an episode. I don't like confused, like this doesn't make any sense. Why are they doing this? This is stupid. This isn't realistic. This was more of like what is happening? What am I watching right now? I need more information. I need to keep watching because I have to see all this play out. And so I really liked that. The part with just him dancing in his room seemed a little unnecessary and a little too long. It did seem like a time filler. I get that it kind of tied in with like them having the band and the song and everything, but it went on way too long for me. I did really enjoy the comedic aspects of this episode, particularly the scene where he meets Jackie. I thought that was really nice the way that they did that, like in the laundromat, and it just was really clever. And he and Jackie did have some really kind of sweet moments there just before it all blew up in his face. I liked seeing him change and kind of forget the mission for a little while and just like go back to being a compassionate human being because it was very clear he was like that before. It was very clear he had a lot of heart before. And so it was nice to see him like remember that and want to just be there for Jackie and be friends with her. And also kind of realize that like he didn't want to be with Jackie. The instance when Elton was a kid, I definitely want to know more about this whole living shadow thing. Don't tell me if it ever comes back up again, because I want to be surprised if it does, but I really, really hope it does. I want to know more about that. Like, just the name itself sounds so intriguing. I am confused, though, about like when it happened, because it was the 10th Doctor, but Rose didn't seem to be with him. And Rose didn't really seem to know anything about Elton. So the timeline, like everything in this show, is confusing. But I just try not to read too much into it. And then my last note here for this episode, Elton's bit at the end with the quote about salvation and damnation being the same thing. It made me realize and kind of like think before and made it click that for most people, if they're encountering the Doctor, it's likely probably one of the worst days of their life. Because the Doctor tends to show up when some major shit's going down. And people die a lot of the times. And it's these really traumatic events when they encounter the Doctor usually. And I never really thought of it that way before, because we get so much time with him and we get Rose and we see the happy moments. Some of them, not nearly enough, but some of them. And so, yeah, it just kind of clicked that, like, yes, you get to meet the Doctor and you meet this incredible being who's so mysterious and so mesmerizing and so captivating. And so, just draws you in and you're just so intrigued by him. But also, chances are some really bad stuff went down. And so you got to cope with that too. And those two things are kind of tied together, the Doctor and whatever the event is. So I would think that it has to be hard for the Doctor to do that, to know that every time he's encountering somebody, usually it's a tough time for them. And I think that like, given everything the Doctor's been through, the Time War, losing all of his people, feeling like he's responsible for that, losing all of his companions, feeling like he's responsible for them, not being able to save people because, there's a lot of people he doesn't get to save. And then now the people that he does encounter, it's generally when something really wrong is happening, really bad for them is happening. And so it's all the more amazing, I think, that the Doctor, the 10th Doctor at least, and sometimes the 9th Doctor, still have this like playful, fun-loving jokester side. Somebody who has been through that much drama and is suppressing that much guilt. I feel like it's no other word than impressive that they can still find things to enjoy and still joke and play. And it's nice, which I do appreciate as the viewer, because it obviously makes for some really enjoyable moments. We also got another hint about Rose. So now that I have seen it all, I know that I was right. I think I mentioned it in one of the episode reactions, maybe, that when I did the Zoom call on Patreon in June, I was asked if I had any predictions for the rest of the series, because it was pretty close to about the halfway point, I think. And I was asked if I had any predictions for like how the series would end or anything that might happen. And one of my predictions was that we were going to lose Rose. And with every episode, it would only seemed more and more obvious that was happening. And the hint in this one for me was saying, like, if you're destroyed if you touch the Doctor for like even a second or something like that. And he wonders how much longer, until the people around him pay the price. So that seems like a pretty clear foreshadowing moment there. This episode honestly makes me mad. It makes me angry because it had so much potential for, like, at least for me. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. Like, I get that people like don't necessarily want to watch it because, Rose and the Doctor aren't in it that much, or at least the Doctor. But I was thoroughly enjoying this. I loved the little family that they found. I loved the like side story with the two of them kind of starting to fall in love. Elton and I forget her name. Moaning Myrtle's character. I loved all of that. That was so sweet. And then it just all went to shit so fast. So fast. And so it was like they just like took this fantastic episode and then just threw it away. Again, I get competition, all that, but that still doesn't mean that it makes it any better of an episode or of a monster. So yeah, this would have had this ended differently. It likely would have been one that I would have been potentially one of my favorites from this series, and would have been one I watched on a rewatch for sure. And now I don't ever need to watch it again. So, okay. Episode 211, Fear Her. This is another one that I thought had a lot of potential and then ended up being a little bit of a letdown by the end. Not as much as the previous one, but it definitely still was a letdown, and I wouldn't watch it on a rewatch. Everything with the Olympics and Chloe's dad was completely unnecessary. I get the timing of the Olympics, like it is what it is. You got to work it into the show, but it didn't fit this story. I would have loved for it to actually fit the story, and it just was so disconnected for me. And the bit about the dad was like especially dark, so it's annoying that it was there for absolutely no reason. Like, I get that Chloe needed to feel alone, but like her dad could have just died and been a good dad. And maybe her mom was depressed because her dad died and that's why she felt alone. We didn't need an abusive father and this whole basically beast, Satan, devil drawing coming to life to try and kill her at the end. Like, that was just way too much. I'm also still really confused about how the elderly woman at the beginning of the episode knew what was going on, or at least knew that something was going on. She could feel it, and I just want to know how, why. They never really explained. She was just kind of there being a creepy old lady at first, even though, she was actually telling the truth. So that part kind of threw me off a bit. I made a random note here about how this show now, because of everything with Bad Wolf in the beginning, and now Torchwood, this show has me looking at everything in the background. A lot of times in the scene, if there's a bunch of posters or graffiti or anything, I'm kind of guilty of not paying attention to what's happening because I'm too busy looking at all the stuff in the background. And there was a scene in this, there were posters of Shane Ward, a musician or something, when they get out of the TARDIS, and they're just a whole bunch of them plastered, which I know is a thing that happens. But it just seemed odd for that to be right there on the set, and it was very obvious. And so I just couldn't stop staring at those posters thinking something was going to be in it. I don't think anything was, but that's just where my brain is now. I am so paranoid about missing something in the background that it's kind of distracting. And I was the same way when I watched the pilot for Torchwood, by the way. You'll hear me talk about it actually in that reaction, which I've only watched the pilot so far. So don't say anything beyond the pilot for Torchwood. Okay, so here's where I think I would have liked for this episode to go. I was really disappointed when Rose opened Chloe's closet door and it wasn't a doorway to where the kids were being held. I would have much rather have them take out that whole stupid dad subplot and have it be Rose going through this closet and this portal to where all these kids are being kept and exploring it and trying to get the kids out. That would have been so much more interesting than everything with the dad and the Olympics and all that stuff. That would have made it an awesome episode, I think. But they didn't do that. So that was disappointing when she just opened the doors and it was a drawing. I mentioned it during the original reaction, but I really liked this being, alien, I guess. I don't know. Whatever it was. I liked that it wasn't actually evil. It didn't know that it was doing anything wrong. It even tried to cheer up the one boy by giving him a cat. Obviously doesn't go about things the best way, but it also made for a nice moment with the doctor because it allows him to once again showcase his incredible level of compassion. He was stroking Chloe's head when he was talking to the Isolus. He defended it to Rose inside the TARDIS, saying it's only a child. And so it was really, really nice to see those moments. And it was nice to finally have something that's not inherently evil and is just out to kill everyone. It just made for an interesting change. I have maybe never related more to her than when she almost said that kids can be right little shits, and then she censored herself because most people aren't okay with people talking crap about kids. That's me. That is so me. If you have kids, I'm sure that they are wonderful, and that's great, and I'm sure that you love them. I am not a kid person, not by any stretch of the imagination. I don't have kids on purpose. And yeah, so I just found that moment really, really funny, and I could relate really hard to that. Knowing what I know about this series and how it ends, I'm glad that Rose got a little bit more history on the doctor by finding out in side note what seemed like an actually really organic way that he was a dad. I also still really, really want more information on that because even Classic Who starts off with him being a grandfather. And so I'm hoping at some point we'll get more information on what happened. You know, like did his kids get lost in the Time War? How does he have kids? Like, did he have someone that he loved? Like, how do the Time Lords procreate? Like, I want to know all of these things. You know, so what happened to Susan's parents? Yeah, I want to know all the details. But it was nice that Rose got this information and got to know another little piece of the Doctor, a pretty important one. Okay, so next note, going back to the Isolus, basically being helped through love was a nice break from the other episodes, and it fit with the rest of the episode. But to then have the scene at the end with the nightmare vision of the dad coming to life was just like doubly annoying, because I liked it being this being that we actually helped through love and not like by trying to conquer it or vanquish it or kill it or any of those sorts of things. It was a nice change of pace. But then we ended up right back at the end of the episode doing the same thing with something that was inherently evil, with something that was trying to basically kill Chloe. And, you know, they got rid of it through singing, but they still had to like conquer this evil thing that was coming after them. And so I was like, okay, well, you gave us a nice change of pace, but then you literally just a few minutes later in the same exact episode took us right back. So yeah. The part at the end with the torch and the announcer being like, this means the Olympic dream is dead. Like, dramatic much? That was so over the top. I get it had to be a tie-in with the Olympics, but like, it's not like the flame went out. He just fell. It's not a big deal. And like the Doctor having to come in and like save the torch and bring back hope and save the Olympic dream was all just too much. Way too much. And then, of course, we had another moment of foreshadowing when Rose says, you know, they keep on trying to split us up, but they never, ever will. And the Doctor says, never say never, ever. And she says, nah, we'll always be okay, you and me. Don't you reckon, Doctor? Yeah. And then he just like looks up at the fireworks. I assume likely thinking about all the companions he's lost in one way or another, like knowing that it'll never be okay. He'll always lose them. But he doesn't want to tell her that because he doesn't want to worry her or scare her or make her sad. He holds it all inside. And so, yeah, that was just another little moment that I was like, all right, well, I guess we're going there. I guess that's where we're heading. And then, of course, we get to Army of Ghosts. And I find out immediately that that's where we're heading. Even though I did predicted it on the Zoom call, I had trouble believing it. Because I thought it would have been a bigger shock, like a bigger surprise or bigger reveal. I didn't think we'd get a warning or a teaser for it. And I honestly didn't really expect her to go in series 2. If you had asked me back in series 1 or even like the beginning of series 2, like, when do you think Rose leaves? Because I knew she left at some point, and I've stated that, I think, from the beginning. I just had no clue when. And if somebody had asked me, I would have guessed series 3 and probably the end of series 3. It seems weird that we only have had one series with David and now we're losing Rose. So like, we've only had one series with the new Doctor and now we're already getting a new companion. Like, I think I would have liked another year with the Doctor and Rose. But it is what it is. The shot of the alien planet when she said, I thought it would never end. How long are you going to stay with me? Forever, blah, blah, blah. When the Doctor and Rose and the TARDIS are like in the foreground and the rock formations are in the background. I don't know why I'm sitting here explaining it. I'm going to put the picture up in this video. It was absolutely gorgeous. Some of the shots they do in this show, which obviously I know they're not real, but I don't care. They are just stunning. And like, those are the places I want to see them explore. And we don't go there. I would have loved to have seen them like be on that planet and explore that place. There was another shot in the second one in Doomsday. It's when he's talking about circling a supernova to do the projection, and it's the TARDIS, and then it's, I'm assuming, the supernova. And it's just it's another beautiful shot as well. Whoever is designing those things, they do a fantastic job because they're so beautiful. Jackie kissing the Doctor. more than once when they got to the apartment was an odd choice. I'm not going to lie, but I think maybe it was meant to show off like that she's finally come to care for the doctor so that it's a deeper loss at the end for all involved, you know. I still thought it was a bit odd, and I thought it was a bit odd that Rose didn't really react to it, but I don't think she saw it. But still, which I know Jackie's been like all over the doctor since basically the first moment they met. I mean, she tried to sleep with him like immediately, but still it just seemed a little odd. Yeah. So I mean, I know that like, it's funny that people still didn't believe aliens were a real thing after everything that's happened, but they were like all on board with these ghosts. Okay. Seeing the Cybermen through the plastic sheeting was really, really creepy. And even more so the second time around, like while I was editing it, because the first time I didn't realize right away that there was something even standing there. The sheeting wasn't opaque enough for me to like tell that there was a figure there until it actually like opened up. And so this time, like when I went through and watched it while I was editing, I knew it was there. And so like I knew what I was looking at, and it was just really creepy. I loved the comedic bits when he pulls Jackie out of the TARDIS and pretends that she's Rose. I think it's probably one of the funniest bits like in the show so far. It just was like a nice little moment, again, of levity in a situation that you think is going to be really tense. Oh yeah, next up is the line, "If it's alien, it's ours." And I'm just not going to touch that one because we all get what they're saying there. Which I like it. I like that they make those comments. But yeah, it was just kind of like a little like, oh, yep, they said that. They went there. All right. I loved the callback to the original charter and being named an enemy of the crown. That was nice, especially because that's one of my favorite episodes from the series and from the new Who show so far. I loved the dynamic and like the interactions between Yvonne and the doctor. It threw me off at first. And I said multiple times, like, this is not what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a very hostile environment and like for them to go after the doctor immediately. But they were like cordial and respectful. And even like, I mean, they admired the doctor. They like revered him basically. But it still was clear that he was an enemy and a prisoner. And I liked how they worked it in kind of like a joking, nonchalant way that he was. It was unexpected. It made it interesting to watch. And again, it was a nice break. It was a nice change of pace from having to like fight his way out of a situation when he encounters a problem like this. Specifically having in mind when I say this, Dalek, episode 6 in season 1, kind of the same thing. He's in like a compound. There's military-esque personnel, a head person in charge who wants information and power. And, he basically had to fight his way out of that. And so, yeah, this was just a nice change of pace from that. He made a reference to the Eternals when talking about the Void. And I feel like that was a random thing to just kind of throw in there. So I'm wondering if it was either a part of Classic Who or is going to be in the show at some point. Otherwise, I don't know why that would be in there. Obviously, I don't want to know if it's either because I haven't gotten to it yet if it is. And if it's not, that's fine. That's been the case with several things too. It just kind of stood out to me as something a little bit odd. And then the last note I have for this episode, which I sort of mentioned in the reaction, was Mickey's focus wasn't really on Rose. I mean, he was excited to see her, but he was far more focused on what was happening, and even seemed like excited by it, which means that his character experienced a pretty big evolution on the parallel Earth. He's changed so much in what appears to be a relatively short period of time, although going by what Pete says in Doomsday, it seems like it might be more like 3 or 4 years. But still, I love Badass Mickey. I want more of Badass Mickey. I would have loved to have seen how he got to that point. Which is still baffling that I say that. But yeah, I totally would watch a spinoff with Mickey and Jake and like seeing what happened in the interim and all that stuff. So obviously I know that doesn't happen, but it would have been nice and I would have watched it. Okay. All right. Doomsday, the last one. So kind of the first note here is that bringing back the Daleks and each time like saying that it's the last of them and they're dead and all of this stuff, it's kind of starting to take away from like the intensity of those moments when they defeat them. If they keep bringing them back and bringing them back this frequently, it feels like it's not as much of a surprise or it's not as intense. And like when we defeat them, it's like, yeah, well, but they're going to be back. So who really cares? Like we won for now. And it surprises me that we've already had 3 Dalek episodes within just the first 2 series. I would have thought it would have been like at most once a series, if not less than that. So I'll be curious to see how that continues on. I mean, I know they're in the void now along with the Cybermen, but as we've seen again, time and time again, that doesn't really mean anything. You know, they were supposed to be dead several times before. And that one still, what did he, I forget what he said, something shift, and he basically, disappeared out into thin air. So that one's still out there, which I wouldn't mind seeing that one again because I did really, really, really like the black color scheme on it. It was awesome. This episode really showed, which kind of going back to the kiss part in the previous one, in Army of Ghosts, it showed, I think, that Jackie is caring for the Doctor. This episode showed the Doctor cares for the Jackie. And it was in the moment, especially like when Jackie was being taken away by the Cybermen and he was like yelling for her and stuff. And I think in that moment, like, because before up to this point, if anything happened to Jackie, he was like protective of her. But I think it was more because he knew Rose would be upset or mad if anything happened to Jackie. And he obviously didn't want that. But in this moment, when Jackie was being taken away, it seemed like he genuinely cared for Jackie and didn't want her to be hurt. He considered her to be part of his little family. And it was nice to see what that had developed into as well. And I liked seeing Jackie's side of it in Army of Ghosts and then seeing the Doctor's side of it in Doomsday. Another thing I thought was interesting about this episode was that like both of the foes in this were ones that placed a very heavy emphasis on not having any emotions. The Cybermen definitely don't want to have any emotions. The Daleks are incapable of having emotion. And so it was kind of interesting. And then the line where the Cyberman says the Doctor is proof that emotions destroy you. And he says, yeah, I am. It was really heartbreaking for like a split second. And then David does what he does best and completely shifts the mood and the tone. And then he like segued it into hope. And like, I really enjoyed that segue. It just felt natural and organic and fun and interesting and engaging to watch. But I really liked how it transitioned into the next part of the episode and the next part of the story, where then we have everybody kind of, zapping in from the parallel world, parallel Earth. So it was a nice tonal shift and a nice transition into, the next thing that we had to go through in that story. In 212, I was hopeful that I would see Jake again after realizing Mickey was there. But by the end of it, I had just assumed it wasn't going to happen. Like, it was just Mickey. We were going to see Jake and whatever. I had moved on. So it was really, really nice to see him in this. Okay, Jackie's escape from the Cybermen, while funny in the moment, was way too easy and completely unbelievable. Like, I don't buy it at all that they wouldn't notice she was walking out of there. So that did take me out of the moment a little bit. Again, kind of funny in the moment when I watched it the first time, but it did irk me that it was easy. And even like watching it again while editing it, it was even more annoying that it was so easy for her to get away. I still have lots more notes for this one. This one definitely by far has the most notes. Okay, so I'm noticing a carryover theme from Classic Who, where the Doctor says things are impossible and then is immediately proven wrong. So it seems odd to me, because he did it in this one and he was wrong. It seems odd to me that after all this time, because it's happening all the way back in season 1 of Classic Who, that he says things are impossible and he's proven wrong. So it seems odd that like he still thinks anything is impossible anymore. I feel like at this point, nothing is impossible and he should know that. And it is kind of another thing that's taking away from the impact of certain moments. Just like when Mickey chose to stay behind on the parallel Earth, and the Doctor was like, oh, like, we can never come back here again. Like, you'll never be able to see him again. Like, there was all this finality to it, according to the Doctor, but I just didn't buy it. I didn't believe him. I figured we'd see Mickey again because it seems like nothing is impossible on the show. And look, I was right. So it does kind of take away. Like, when he says something's impossible now, I'm just like, yeah, but it's not. Which I'm sure at times there will be things. Even in this one, he said once he closed up the breach, then it's sealed off. Like, nothing can ever get through. And then at the very end, he's like, yeah, but there was still a little crack left. I'm like, well, but you just said nothing could get through. And so it does kind of take away from it a little. And I do also have a note here that, like, I don't know if that's intentional or not. Like, maybe it is intentional. Maybe it's supposed to be communicating to the viewer that the doctor's word isn't always, like, unfailing, and that, like, he doesn't always know what he's talking about. And maybe he has a little bit of ego. Well, he definitely has ego. But about this, and just assuming that he always knows what's right and knows how things work and knows that these things are impossible, and then he's proven wrong. And so maybe that's to show us that he isn't always right. Or maybe I'm just reading way too much into it, which is also entirely possible. It was interesting to me. I think I might have said this in the reaction, but it was interesting to me that he calls it, like, our Earth, his world, back on my world, and he calls it, like, let's go home or something like that. Like, he calls it his world. And I think that that's really nice because he's been, so many places everywhere. He can, like, is this parallel Earth. Like, why couldn't that be his world? He has no home, but clearly our Earth feels like the closest thing that he has to it. And I think it's because of Rose. It's her home, so it's his home. And the home of several of his previous companions, if not all. I don't know because I haven't seen them. I am kind of assuming that it is all of them. I don't know. I'm curious to see if he does ever have a non-human companion at any point in Classic Who. I obviously don't want to know. It makes sense for the show that everybody would be human, but for the story, if it were real, I feel like the Doctor would definitely have non-human companions at some point. So now that he's lost Rose, I am curious to see if he's going to still feel this way. If he's still going to think, our Earth is his Earth and his world. He talked about the fall of Arcadia. That was interesting to me. I want to learn more. I know that there is a movie that was done when a company here in the US had the rights to Doctor Who. And I know that it's generally not well regarded. And I think it was about the Time War, if I remember correctly. Like, somebody can explain that to me if I'm getting that wrong. So I don't know if there are things from that I'm missing when he refers to the Time War and, like, the fall of Arcadia and refers back to this stuff, or if this is all stuff that is just new as of New Who. So I don't know if I should be watching that movie or not. And I don't know if it's considered canon because everything else, was BBC. And then we have this movie, which was, I don't know what production company, but here in the US. So that's just kind of a little side note there. The Cult of Skaro, I feel like that's an odd thing to introduce right here, unless it was either a part of Classic Who, which didn't seem likely because the Doctor thought they were a legend, or will come back again in the future somehow. And since that one disappeared, I think that's more likely. So I think we'll see the Cult of Skaro again. I absolutely love the reunion between Pete and Jackie in the hallway. Pete had only been without his Jackie for a few years, and Rose had seen both her actual dad and parallel Pete fairly recently, but Jackie hadn't seen any version of Pete in, 19 years, 20 years, something like that. And so that was a big moment for her, and I feel like she did it very well. I feel like the actress did it really well. I also love watching kind of just how everybody in the background was reacting, especially Rose. And even like the Doctor was laughing sometimes. And it was just nice to see those characters witnessing that moment and letting them have their moment. Because, Jackie and Pete, especially parallel Pete, are not the main characters in this show. And it was nice to see them literally in front, with everybody else literally in the background. But also kind of stepping back and letting those two characters have their moment. I know that I realize fully that the two of them coming together in that moment was super cheesy and probably not really what a lot of people like. But I'm a sucker for like meant to be and finding each other, and like the fact that like even the parallel versions of themselves like can't resist each other and they still come together and fall in love. Like that just makes my sappy little heart so happy. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, even if it was cheesy. I loved the callback and like the parallel to the series 1 final story where the Doctor tricks her and sends her away. And then he kind of sort of does the same thing here. And she says, "Oh, no, you don't. You're not doing that to me again." Like it was just kind of a nice little moment to, bring up the history that they have together, and that he sent her away once and she found her way back to him. And she did it again this time too, which means I hope that she would do it again in the future, but they've already introduced a new companion and I know Rose is on it now. So I'm just assuming she's gone. And a lot of the comments have let me know that. So kind of be careful when you're leaving your comments, because at this point, like, I don't know that Rose is done. For all I know, she makes a cameo in the future. So just kind of be careful when you're talking about characters like leaving the show or coming on. Same thing with this new character, the one who came in at the very end of this episode. A lot of people referred to her as a companion. And for all I know, she was only in, the Christmas special. But now I know she's a companion. So just kind of be careful with how you're talking about these characters, especially when new ones are introduced or when people leave or when they're like side characters, stuff like that. I am still so confused by Yvonne. Not only was she still inside the suit, like cognitively and like controlling it, but she even still had some of her own voice. Like she still sounded a little bit like herself. And she appeared to be crying, maybe as times to take it, at the very least leaking, which was confusing. It makes no sense to me. Like, I feel like one of the things that makes Cybermen so terrifying is that they just erase you completely, like, so easily. And so for her to still be in there was like, wait a minute, why? Like, I didn't think that you could do that. If you can do that, obviously it's not great that you're now in a metal suit, but like, you're still there. You're not completely erased. And so I don't know if that was like just for this episode to have like that, that moment, or if there's deeper meaning to it. And like that is really a possibility with these Cybermen. And if so, was she maybe able to do it because she knew what was happening ahead of time? She was aware of what the process was-ish. She knew what was going to happen to her. And so somehow that allowed her to retain consciousness and control when placed in the suit. I don't know. All that was just kind of confusing to me. I would have liked some answers there. Even when editing this episode, the doctor's scream when Rose lets go and starts to head for the breach, like gave me full chills, and made my eyes tear up. And then Rose's pounding on the wall and like shouting to be taken back. Oh my God. Like I was crying, like kind of still tearing up now thinking about it. Both David and Billy did such a good job in that scene. And then also in the end, I really liked how differently they expressed their grief in that moment where like they're each standing on, each side of the wall. And Rose is a mess. Her makeup's going everywhere. She's crying. She's like breathing really heavy because she was like basically sobbing. And then on the other side, you have the doctor just frozen. And he's just starting to go through his process of coping after losing like so many people that he's loved. It seems like he has this process now where he basically just starts to go numb and just shuts down his emotions so that he can keep going. And like you could see that happening in that moment. She was just a mess and he was just so composed because he was starting to go numb and shut down and starting to go into his coping mechanism. And it was like beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. My next note here is one line. Of course, they're going to buy what happened in Bad Wolf Bay. It was a nice little callback. I liked it. Okay, so during editing, it kind of started a little bit with that scene, where they got separated at the breach. And then during their goodbye, I had to stop editing multiple times because I was crying too hard. Just during the editing process, I had already seen it and I still was crying too hard. Like I couldn't see the screen anymore to continue editing and know what I was doing. And the part that I was doing okay. I had tears a little bit, but the part that really set me off was how proud he was of her when she told him about like working for Torchwood. And he said, Rose Tyler, Defender of the Earth. Like, I don't know why. It just like got to me and that like opened the floodgates and I started crying again and then had to stop several times because it was just such an amazing scene. And again, I know for a lot of people it was over the top and it was sappy, but that's what I'm here for. So I loved it. Another thing I picked up on during editing, and it's a little annoying that it took me this long to pick up on it, but like, of course, Rose loves him and will miss him, but she seems more heartbroken that he's going to be alone. She mentioned several times about how like he was going to be alone and now you're going to do this alone. And so like, yeah, she's going to miss him, but she just more than anything just doesn't want him to be alone. And like, it's so beautiful. Even if it is a little bit egotistical for her to think that like, oh, now his life is ruined and it's over and he's never going to meet somebody else that he cares about like me. Okay, Rose. He's had several companions before. You've met at least one. It's likely he's going to have more after you, but it still was a beautiful moment. And then again, after he stops projecting, he allows himself one single tear and then he composes himself. Like that's just his coping mechanism, like his survival mechanism. He can't grieve everyone really, which means it's all still there, which I think is why it bubbles up into this pretty eccentric personality with all of these mood swings, is because he's just holding everything inside. And then my final note is about the bride. I did mention in the reaction that I saw her in The Office and that I couldn't stand her in that show, the US version of The Office, obviously. And I think I've seen her in something else and I didn't really like her character in that either. I can't remember what it was and I don't want to look it up because I don't want to risk seeing like how many episodes of Doctor Who she's in when I look it up. And she did honestly seem to be kind of bitchy here. But all that said, it's kind of a crazy situation for her, I'm assuming. She seemed like she was getting married and now all of a sudden she's in a strange place and she doesn't know how she got there. That would be a little jarring. So maybe her reaction to that is to get annoyed. So I'm going to try and give her the benefit of the doubt on that. And I'm going to try and keep an open mind on her character, especially since she's apparently going to be a new companion. So we'll see. We will see. But all right, now that I have had my first full series with David and the 10th Doctor, I can definitively say, as of this moment, I still really miss Christopher, and I would rather have Christopher and the 9th Doctor. I love David. I love the 10th. Like, fantastic job. I just have a soft spot for Christopher and the 9th, and it hasn't gone away yet. Again, I still have, I think, 2 more series with David, though, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes. That could still change. All right, so that is another, I keep saying seasons. It'll happen eventually. I'll finally get it down and it'll become a habit. But that's another series down. I can't believe we're already 2 series through this. This seems insane. I feel like I'm going through it so quickly. Of course, I am doing 2 episodes a week now, so that helps. But still, other than like finding out that it seems like we don't ever get Rose back and that this new one is a companion, I don't think I've gotten any other spoilers. So that's good. I have no idea what series 3 is going to be about. Not a single clue. I mean, maybe Torchwood's still around, I would assume. So I don't know if that's still going to be a thing, but now there's a spinoff. So like, I don't know that that's going to be so much in Doctor Who. We'll find out. We will find out. All right. That is going to wrap up this one. I told you it'd be around an hour. Thank you so much for still being here and still engaging with me in the comments. Even if I can't always get to all of them, and especially if I can't do it like right away, I do read every single one of them. And they help me, honestly. They help me process these episodes and think about things in a different way than I wouldn't have. So as long as they're spoiler free, I do really enjoy them. And I enjoy hearing what you think about the episodes and your perspective on it and how you took certain things. So definitely feel free to comment on this. Obviously, like, I know not everyone's going to agree with me. And I am probably interpreting things the wrong way. I'm reading too much into some things and not enough into another. Totally get all that. But yeah, no, this has been an incredible journey so far, and I'm really excited to continue going. And you are part of what makes me so excited to do that. So thank you so, so much, especially if you're watching this on Patreon. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to join those on Patreon who are months ahead at this point and have access to the full reactions, just click the link in the description below. And if you want to hang out on YouTube, that's cool. Just make sure you hit the subscribe and notification button so you don't miss future episodes. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.